You know what's interesting? Some people only realize what they had after they've destroyed it. They walk around with an inflated ego, thinking you'll always be there, always forgiving, always understanding, always waiting. But then something happens, the life catches up. Karma steps in, and suddenly, the very confidence they used to push you away, it starts to crumble. That's when regret comes in, fast, heavy, and undeniable. And in that moment, they finally understand you weren't just another option. You were the wake-up call they didn't see coming. We often mistake ego for strength. When someone walks around acting like they're untouchable, like they don't need anyone, like they're always right, like they're above consequences, it can be easy to think they're winning. Especially in relationships. The person who cares less seems to have more power, right? They don't chase, they don't apologize, they don't bend. And for a while, it might even seem like they're getting away with it. You're left picking up the pieces, trying to make sense of what went wrong, while they move on like it was nothing. But here's what's real: ego is loud, but karma doesn't shout. It waits. There's a timing to life, a rhythm, and even when someone seems to be avoiding accountability, they're not escaping it. Not really. Karma isn't about instant punishment. It's about inevitable clarity. People eventually come face to face with the effects of their behavior, whether it's through lost opportunities, broken relationships, or the empty silence that follows when they've pushed too many people away. Ego creates distance. It tells a person, you don't need to change. You're fine the way you are. And for a while, they believe it. They lean into that arrogance. They dismiss how they made you feel. They minimize the damage. But that's a fragile structure, because the moment something cracks, when they face a setback, a failure, or a relationship that doesn't tolerate their behavior the way you did, that's when it all starts to break down. Karma is subtle like that. It doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it's just a quiet realization that they lost someone irreplaceable, that the patience you gave them was a rare gift, that the support, the forgiveness, the understanding, they misused it. And now it's gone. That's when the regret hits. And it doesn't just trickle in, it floods. Because they begin to realize that the problem wasn't you asking for more. The problem was them thinking they didn't have to give it. What's powerful is that karma doesn't have to be something you hope for. You don't have to wish them harm or wait for some kind of payback. Life takes care of that on its own. People can only run from their reflection for so long. Eventually, they see themselves clearly. And when they do, it's not always pretty. And the louder their ego was, the harder it is to accept the truth. That's where regret comes in. Because once someone's ego has been cracked by life, once they've been humbled by reality, they're forced to confront what they pushed away. And you become the face of that lesson. What you offered, what you tolerated, what you tried to build, it all becomes clearer to them once it's no longer available. That's the twist. Ego may win in the short term, but karma always finishes the story. And when that story comes full circle, regret isn't just a feeling, it's a reckoning. And they finally understand, maybe too late, that love wasn't their right. It was a privilege, one they took for granted, one they thought they could walk away from without consequences. But karma doesn't shout. It just arrives when the ego is quiet enough to hear the truth. There's a moment that always comes, even if it takes time, the moment someone realizes you're actually gone. Not emotionally waiting in the wings, not checking their stories, not sending that one last message, not hoping they come back, just gone. And it's in that moment, when they finally feel the space your absence leaves, that regret begins to stir. Because he thought you'd always be there. He thought your kindness was endless, your forgiveness bottomless, your patience permanent. He saw how you showed up, how you gave the benefit of the doubt, how you tried to understand him when he didn't even try to understand himself. And he mistook that for weakness. He thought it meant he'd keep taking without giving, that he could keep crossing boundaries and you'd keep lowering the bar. But what he didn't realize is that strong people don't stay forever where they're not valued. You might bend for love, but you don't break. And when you reach your limit, and everyone does, there's no coming back from that kind of silence. Not because you're trying to hurt him, but because you finally started choosing you instead. And that shift is quiet. It doesn't come with shouting or big fights. It's just a change in energy, in effort, in presence. And that's what shakes him, because he never thought it would happen. His ego made him believe you needed him more than he needed you, that your heart made you weak, that he could take his time, play his games, and still have you waiting at the end of it all. He counted on your loyalty, not realizing that loyalty ends where self-respect begins. So when you finally stopped answering, stopped reacting, stopped showing up, he noticed. And not in a way that flatters him, in a way that unsettles him, because now he has to live with the weight of his choices. The truth is, when someone takes you for granted, they don't really see you. They see the role you play in their life, the comfort, the convenience, the emotional support. And they assume it will always be there, until it's not. And when it's gone, they don't just miss you. They miss who they were when you were around. The version of themselves that felt held, admired, and supported. They don't just lose a relationship. They lose the person who made them feel okay, even when they didn't deserve it. That's when the regret comes. Not necessarily because they're ready to love you the right way, but because they realize you were never the problem. It was never about you asking for too much. It was about them giving too little. And the more they look back, the more it hits them. All the moments they dismissed, all the times they didn't listen, all the ways you tried while they took. And the scariest part for them is this: they know they can't recreate what they had with you. Because it wasn't just about who you were. It was about who were when they were with you. And now that person is gone. The shift in power doesn't come when you get angry. It comes when you get indifferent. When your heart lets go, when you stop wondering if they'll come around and start realizing you've already outgrown them. And that's what he never saw coming, because he thought you'd always be there, until the day you weren't. And by then, his apology, his clarity, his sudden change of heart. It's too little, too late, because you didn't just leave, you evolved. And now, he's stuck with the realization that while he stayed the same, you moved on. Regret isn't always immediate. In fact, it's usually delayed. People don't always feel the consequences of their actions the moment they make the mistake. They might walk away from something real, something meaningful, without a second thought. They might even look happy, seem unaffected, or act like they've moved on without an ounce of guilt. But just because they look fine doesn't mean they are. Regret takes time. It creeps in slowly and then suddenly all at once. And when it does hit, it's heavy. It doesn't tap them on the shoulder gently. It punches them in the gut when they least expect it. There's something uniquely painful about realizing you hurt someone who actually cared. At first, they might convince themselves it was for the best. They might justify their behavior, shift the blame, or minimize what happened. That's how the ego protects itself. It tells them, you didn't do anything wrong, you had every right. But that story only works for so long. Eventually, the ego runs out of excuses, and that's when reality catches up. Something triggers it. A quiet night, a memory, seeing you happy without them. Suddenly, the silence isn't comforting anymore. It's deafening. And they start to feel the weight of what they let go of. The reason regret hits so hard is because it's not about what happened in the moment. It's about what continues to happen afterward. It's seeing how someone you hurt is thriving without you. It's realizing that you didn't just lose a person. You lost the version of yourself that had access to that love, that warmth, that connection. That's when the mask falls. That's when the ego, no matter how tough it pretended to be, starts to crack. And beneath it, a lot of unspoken pain, shame, and confusion. They thought they could walk away unscathed. Maybe they even thought you'd come running back, that they could fix it later if they ever felt like it. That's how regret becomes so cruel. It's tied to the assumption that time is on their side. But what they don't realize is, while they were delaying maturity, you were growing, you were healing, you were moving forward. And by the time regret hits them, you're already gone, not just physically, but emotionally. And there's nothing more painful than realizing the door you always assumed would be open is now permanently closed. People tend to mistake your grace for permanence. They assume you'll always be available just because you were generous with your heart. But once you truly stop reaching out, stop investing, stop caring, they feel that absence more deeply than they ever anticipated. And it eats at them. Because now they have to live with the memory of what they had, knowing we're the one who destroyed it. And knowing that the person who once looked at them with love in their eyes now barely thinks about them at all. That's why regret hits so hard, because it's not about knowing what they lost. It's about realizing they knew and still chose wrong. It's about knowing they had something good and still messed it up. And that weight doesn't lift easily. It lingers, it haunts, and it teaches in the harshest way possible. Because by the time regret arrives, the damage is done, the love is gone, and the person they took for granted has already turned the page. That's when it finally hits the Meng. They didn't just make a mistake. They lost something real, and there's no going back. Karma gets misunderstood a lot. People think it's about revenge, about getting back at someone, about watching them fall because of what they did. But real karma isn't about punishing anyone. It's about bringing clarity. It's not this dramatic cosmic payback. It's the quiet, undeniable moment when is finally forced to face themselves. It's not about you sitting around waiting for them to get what they deserve. It's about knowing that, eventually, everyone comes face to face with the truth of who they've been. When someone treats you carelessly, they may walk away without looking back. They may seem fine, even happy, like nothing's wrong. But karma isn't working on your timeline. It's working on theirs. And it's not coming in the form of a failed relationship or lost friends. It comes in those moments when they're left alone with their choices. When they realize the person they used, dismissed, or pushed away was actually the one person who showed up for them in a way no one else did. That's when karma moves in. Not loudly, not with fanfare, just with truth. And truth is the one thing ego can't outrun forever. When someone has a big ego, they often protect themselves by blaming others. It's easier to say, she was too emotional, than it is to say, I was emotionally unavailable. It's easier to say, he was too demanding, than to admit, I never made an effort. But the truth has a way of catching up. At first, they live in their version of the story. They tell themselves you were the problem. That they were right to leave, right to be distant, right to protect themselves. But over time, especially when similar patterns show up in their other relationships, they're forced to reckon with the possibility that maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was them. Karma isn't about seeing someone suffer, it's about watching them understand, watching them look back and finally see the moments where they could have shown up but didn't. Where they could have been kind, patient, honest, but chose pride instead. And now, they're left with the knowledge that they didn't just hurt someone. They lost someone. They lost someone who genuinely cared, who tried, who showed grace even when it wasn't deserved. And that kind of loss doesn't go away quietly. You don't need to wish for someone's karma. You don't need to be the one to show them what they did wrong. Life handles that. Because everyone, eventually, is put in a situation where the roles are reversed, where they care more than the other person does, where they're the one chasing, wondering, hurting. And it's in that experience that the lesson really lands. That's when the mirror goes up, and suddenly, all the excuses fall flat. That's when they think back to you, not as someone they lost, but as someone they failed. The most powerful part of this process is that you don't have to be involved. You don't have to check if they're learning or hurting or reflecting. You just live your life. Heal, grow, move forward, because karma doesn't come through your hands. It comes through theirs. Through the moments they realize they can't undo. Through the words they should have said, but didn't. Through the choices they made while blinded by ego. That's karma. Not some dramatic downfall, but a quiet understanding that who they were wasn't enough to keep someone like you. And by the time they figure it out, you've already evolved into someone who wouldn't accept what they offered in the first place. Silence can be unsettling, especially when it comes from someone who used to care, someone who used to explain, to fight for the relationship, to try and make things work. When that kind of person goes quiet, it says more than any loud argument or emotional outburst ever could. Because silence doesn't just mean there's nothing left to say. It means there's nothing left to prove. And for someone who's used to controlling the dynamic, used to getting away with their behavior, that silence hits differently. At first, he might not notice it. He might think you're just giving him space, cooling off, playing hard to get. His ego tells him it's temporary, that you'll come back like you always do. But time passes. You don't call, you don't check in, you stop showing up emotionally. And that's when it starts to sink in. You're not being quiet to punish him. You're quiet because you've finally realized you deserve better. And that realization, your shift from seeking to choosing, is louder than anything you could say. There's a power in walking away with grace, not slamming doors, not sending long emotional texts, not trying to make someone understand your worth, just quietly removing yourself. And that power is undeniable, because people can argue with your words, but they can't argue with your absence. They can try to defend their behavior, justify their choices, rewrite the narrative, but they can't deny the fact that you're gone, that you're not playing the game anymore, that you no longer need closure or clarity or an apology to move on. That's when silence becomes the loudest. I deserve better. Not in a bitter, spiteful way, but in a grounded, self-respecting one. It's not about making them suffer. It's about protecting your peace. It's about choosing not to invest energy into someone who refused to match it. And deep down, they feel it. Even if they don't say it, even if they pretend not to care, that silence becomes a mirror. It forces them to sit with what they did or didn't do. It brings attention to the gap your presence used to fill. And no distraction, no rebound, no temporary fix can cover that up for long. There's something incredibly clear about the way you stop explaining yourself. You no longer try to make them understand why you needed more. You don't keep reminding them of the times you were there, the things you did, the love you gave. You don't have to. Because now, it's their turn to feel the absence of it all. And without the distraction of your voice, all they're left with is their own. That's when the regret begins to whisper. That's when they begin to realize the cost of taking you for granted. What's often misunderstood is that silence isn't cold. It's full of meaning. It's the final act of self-respect. It's saying, I don't need to be chosen anymore. I choose myself. And for someone who relied on your emotional investment to keep their ego intact, that's a loss they didn't prepare for. They expected resistance. They expected emotion. They didn't expect peace. Because peace means finality. It means you've outgrown the cycle. And that's what shakes them more than anything. So, while they may have been louder, more confident, more distant, you leaving quietly says everything. It says you're no longer available for the bare minimum. It says you know your value now. And more than any fight or goodbye, your silence becomes the turning point. The moment they realize they didn't just lose your voice, they lost access to you. There's a difference between being someone's loss and being someone's lesson. One stings for a while. The other stays with them forever. When you've given your best to someone, your love, your loyalty, your energy, and they took it for granted, it's easy to feel like you were the one who lost. But the truth is, when someone walks away from something real, something sincere, something built with care, they're the ones who carry the weight. Because you weren't just a chapter in their life. You were the one who showed them what real looks like. You were the moment they didn't realize they needed to grow up. You didn't lose by loving them. You didn't lose by giving them your time. You didn't even lose by hoping they'd change, because your intention was pure. You showed up. You tried. You believed in the possibility of something meaningful. That takes strength, not weakness. What they'll come to realize, maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, is that you were the wake-up call they ignored. You were the one who reflected everything they weren't ready to become. And when people aren't ready, they often reject the very thing that could elevate them. That's where the regret lies. Not just in missing you, but in realizing you were never the one to blame. That you weren't asking for too much, you were just asking the wrong person. And now, they have to live with the knowledge that someone was willing to them with patience, with heart, with genuine love. And they chose ego, pride, or indifference instead. That realization is what sticks. Because people don't forget the ones who saw them clearly and loved them anyway. They don't forget the ones who challenged them to be better, not out of criticism, but because they believed in their potential. You don't have to carry the pain of how it ended forever. Because when you were with them, you gave them something they didn't know how to receive. You became the standard. And whether they admit it or not, whether they come back or not, they will carry that standard into every future connection. That doesn't mean you were meant to fix them or wait for them. It just means your role in their story was transformative, even if it wasn't appreciated in real time. That's why you're the lesson. Because now, when they meet someone new, they'll remember how you communicated, how you supported them, how you handled conflict, how you loved without holding back. And they'll realize how different that was from the way most people move through the world. They'll compare. And the comparison will be sharp. They'll search for parts of you in people who aren't you and wonder why it doesn't feel the same. But by then, you'll be long gone. You'll be healing, evolving, thriving, not because of the pain they caused, but because of the strength you found after they left. The weight of your absence. That's the thing they didn't understand. Losing you wouldn't just mean missing you. It would mean confronting the version of themselves that let you go. The immature, selfish, or emotionally unavailable version of them that couldn't rise to meet your love. And now, they have to grow through that. You don't have to be bitter. You don't have to be angry. You just have to know that you were never a loss. They just didn't recognize the opportunity they had when it was right in front of them. You were the one who gave them the mirror, and when they finally looked into it, they couldn't avoid the truth. You weren't the one they left behind. You were the one they should have risen for. So, if you've ever been made to feel like you were too much, too emotional, too loyal, or too easy to walk away from, remember this: you weren't the mistake. You were the mirror. You were the lesson life gave someone who wasn't ready to appreciate it. And while they may not have seen it then, karma has a way of revealing what ego tried to ignore. Their regret isn't your responsibility. Their growth isn't your burden to carry. You don't have to chase closure, beg for acknowledgement, or wait for someone to realize your worth. Because every step you take in silence, in self-respect, in peace, that's you writing a new story where you are the one who wins. Not because they finally came back, but because you finally moved on. Let karma do what it does. You just keep evolving.